Hello and welcome to Peggy's Plants, coming to you from Central Florida. Several months ago, I received my first ever tissue cultures, and I recorded the acclimation process step by step, as well as the first few months of growth. So today I'd like to share with you my experience with growing Philodendron Florida Beauty from tissue culture. There are 5 Florida Beauty plantlets in this container. For the first couple of days, I just left the plantlets in the container so that they could acclimate to room temperature in my home. On day 3, I mixed approximately 40% Fluval Stratum and 60% perlite to use as my planting medium. I'll leave a link in the description box in case you're interested in trying this method as well. After mixing the Fluval Stratum and the perlite, I use 5 clear cups with lids to add some of the mixture to each of the cups. I mixed the second batch because I ran short and will also need some to use as backfill once I put the plantlets in the cups. I decided on these clear plastic cups so that I could monitor the roots at all times. These are simple beverage cups, but you can use any small pot. Now, because the plantlets will need plenty of humidity, I covered the openings in the lids with tape. I figured this would help maintain the moisture in the planting medium longer. I repeated this process on all 5 lids so that I would have one for each plant. These plantlets have been growing in this airtight container, and this will be their first time being exposed to air. They're growing in a gel substance called agar, which contains nutrients. Now, it's important to remove as much agar as possible from the plantlet and roots in order to avoid mold growth and possible rotting of the plantlet and roots. This is done using running water. So what I'm doing here is trying to get the water like lukewarm. You don't want it too hot or too cold. I put a little tray in the bottom so that I wouldn't risk any of the plantlets being washed down the drain. Once I was comfortable with the water temperature, I took each plantlet one at a time and rinsed it vigorously under the water. Here's a quick peek at the plantlet. Very nice variegation, right? So I just put each one in my hand, rinsed it under the water, and as you can see, the water stream is quite strong. Because again, you want to make sure that you get all of the agar or as much as possible off of the plant. The water started getting a little cool here, so I had to make an adjustment, and once I was comfortable again, I vigorously rinsed the plant. Now, once I was happy with the amount of agar that had been removed and checked it over, I didn't see any, large quantities of it left. I put it in another tray which contained water and hydrogen peroxide. It's actually distilled water and hydrogen peroxide. And then I moved on to the next plantlet. I repeated this process for all 5 plantlets. When I first began, I was quite timid with the plants. I was really concerned about, losing leaves, losing roots. But these little tissue cultures are a lot more sturdy than I expected. And as you can see, some of them have quite a bit of roots, others not so much. Some of the leaves that were dying off, I just went on and removed them. But yeah, they held up quite well, much better than I expected. So like I said, I continued the process until all of them had been rinsed thoroughly and I had removed as much of the agar under the water as possible. As I mentioned previously, these are Philodendron Florida Beauties, and I really, really like how variegated they are. So hopefully they will remain that variegated throughout the growing process, and I won't have any problems with these tissue cultures, but you'll see how it goes. This is the last one, and here are all 5 plantlets. Right now they're just soaking in the distilled water and hydrogen peroxide. At this point, I just went back and checked over each plantlet to see if there were any areas that I needed to, that I had missed. Where I saw a good amount of agar still present on the plantlets, I just took a soft paintbrush and wiped it off gently. Um, it was hard sometimes to see when it came to the roots whether or not the substance was a part of the root or not. So I did lose some roots, but for the most part, this worked out really, really well. And I do recommend just going over it with the paintbrush in those areas where you still see agar present. Because again, this can lead to mold and then rot of the roots or the plantlet. Before planting the plantlets in the cups, I decided to go ahead and pre-moisten the mixture of Fluval Stratum and perlite. This is required so that your plant, this is the moisture that your plant is going to use to hydrate as well as to maintain the humidity level in the cup. I decided to go through and just do each cup, moisten each cup, so that I wouldn't have to stop and do this in between planting the plantlets. I wasn't really sure about how much to moisten the medium, so I figured I'd just give it a few sprays, and if I needed to go back later and add more, it would be easier to add more than to remove some and disturb the plantlets once they were planted. So I just made sure it was, well moistened, but I didn't have a lot in the bottom of the cup. I then used the end of my paintbrush to create a hole in which I could plant the plantlet. I then used the end of the brush again in order to backfill the plantlet. 1 down, 4 more to go. I repeated the process of removing any agar that still remained on the roots and plantlet with the paintbrush, and then planting each one in the cup of Fluval Stratum and perlite. I also gave each plantlet another once over to make sure that I had removed any leaves that looked like they weren't viable, as well as any roots. So as I said, I went on and repeated this process of cleaning each plantlet and then planting them in the perlite and Fluval Stratum, as I showed you with the first one. And I'm really impressed with how healthy these little plantlets look so far. I hope they will continue to look this way. And again, I just used the tip of the other end of the paintbrush to backfill. And this is what the plantlet looks like, all planted up. And as you can see, it's not too wet, but everything is moistened. And I'm going to maintain this humidity by using the lid that I sealed off with tape, and I hope that's enough to maintain the humidity. Once I finished with all 5 plantlets, this is what they look like. Doing my research to find out exactly how to acclimate tissue culture, I did see that a lot of people transplant their plantlets directly into soil, so that is also an option. I am just sharing with you the way that I decided to do it because I am more comfortable with small plants with fine roots. I like to use perlite and Fluval Stratum, so I decided to do that in this instant. In addition to providing these plantlets with an abundance of humidity, I read that you also have to provide them with a lot of good lighting. So I decided to put them in this bin and place them in my grow tent. I didn't want to risk burning them, so I put them on the second shelf under a shelf that also has a covering of a translucent mat, and that way they would get plenty of light but not direct hot light. So as you can see here, the shelf above does have a mat. After 3 days, I couldn't help myself any longer and I had to check on the plantlets to see how they were doing, and this is how they looked. So far, all five of them are doing well. They're standing up, they're perky. I don't see, it doesn't look like any of them are having issues at this point. However, I noticed that there wasn't a lot of moisture in the cups, so I decided to add a little mist to some of the cups. I know it's been only 3 days, but to me it does look like these three have grown a little. The other two, not so much, but these three, look at this one, is actually getting an additional leaf. So yeah, it looks like these are taking off and doing well. After only 5 days later, I think you will also agree that there's been some significant growth. They're still small plantlets, but as you can see, some of them have additional leaves. The leaves are quite larger. You can easily see the plantlets now in the cup. I'm very impressed with how quickly these plantlets are growing. The leaves on this plantlet have definitely gotten larger, and however, it's not growing up, it's just spreading out. But nice variegation. This next one, as you can see, it's starting to grow up a little bit, just a little bit. You can see it's separated from the perlite mixture, so it's starting to grow up towards the light some, and the leaves have definitely gotten larger. And this next one is definitely impressive. Look at the size of these leaves. It's got a new leaf unfurling. It has grown an additional leaf since it was planted. And look how tall that one is. So this one is doing really, really well. That's impressive. All right, let's take a look at this one. This one has also grown up quite a bit. Look at this one, really stretching out. Nice size, really nice variegation. Ooh, I'm excited about these Florida Beauties. Very nice growth. I'm really surprised at how quickly these plantlets are growing. Now, if I was going to be concerned about one, it would be this one. It has grown some, but it's starting to develop a lot of white leaves, and which is going to make it harder for this plant to photosynthesize. So hopefully it will start giving me more green, but if there's one that is concerning me, it would probably be this one. And that is what the five of them are presently looking like after 5 additional days. And this is what the Florida Beauty plantlets look like after 4 months. As you can see, there are only 3 left. The one that was putting out a lot of white, it did eventually end up dying off, and I wasn't able to save it. It just wouldn't give me any color ever. And another one did suffer from root rot. But these 3 are quite hardy. They've been doing well. This one not growing tall, but putting out leaves on a regular basis and looking really healthy. And yeah, so I'm really happy with this one. I love the variegation. This one doesn't have quite as much variegation, but it is growing in the same kind of pattern, not getting very tall, but putting out lots of leaves and very healthy. As you can see, I transplanted them to leca, which is what I did with all 3 of them, and they are responding well to it. But very healthy plants, no problem, easy growing. So that's that one. And the third and final one, let me make some room so I can bring that one forward so you can take a look at it. Uh, the third and final Florida Beauty is growing totally differently. This one is growing more vertically, putting out a lot fewer leaves, giving me a lot less variegation, but it was one that didn't have a lot of variegation to start with. This one was a problem child. Some of the bottom leaves rotted off. I didn't know if this one was going to make it, but now it's out of the woods and it's doing well. The leaves are shaped totally different. The plant is growing in a totally different plant pattern, but it looks like it's going to be fine too. So would I do this again? Absolutely. It was not nearly as difficult acclimating the plants from tissue culture as I thought it would be. And in fact, I've already ordered some more tissue cultures to do this. And as you can see, it was a very easy process and I would highly recommend it. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. I hope to see you next time. Go out there and get some tissue culture plants. It's a great way to save money on rare plants. Hope to see you soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know if you've ever done any tissue cultures and what your experience has been down in the comments. Take care. Bye-bye.